Being able to touch the entire world not with just one passport but with a combination of passports and golden visas. If you have $1 million or several million to invest, here are the best options you can obtain publicly or discreetly. Depending you are from and which passport you have, you will get options to gain freedom of movement or get a second option just in case, or maybe you want to renounce your current citizenship in order to get one better. If we start with France or any other passport in the European Union, we already have one of the best passports in the world in terms of freedom of movement in full 2025. Unless in the future they impose taxation by passport or very restrictive measures, no one is going to consider renouncing it like Americans do. So let's say French people need to look for options around the world not to improve their freedom of movement, but to have a second options across the globe, to be able to live there or perhaps have the option to renounce like Americans do. In the case of an Indian or Bangladeshi citizen, their passports don't allow them to travel into the Schengen area without problems. For Americans, many don't consider renouncing and have a position similar to Latin Americans. But if you do consider renouncing, not just because of taxes but also because of reporting obligations, it would be wise to build a complete strategy. Because if you renounce, you are left with nothing. That's why it's important to have the same level of freedom of movement or even a visa that allows you to return to the US as a tourist. Once you renounce that passport, it becomes one of the hardest accesses to recover. We already know that all over the world there are citizenship by investment, citizenship by merit, temporary and permanent residencies, and golden visas. What's interesting here is to invest or donate in countries or unions to secure access. For example, let's look at Caribbean passports. Out of the 5 that exist, let's say you go with Grenada, a mid-tier reputation. It's the only one I would consider through real estate and one of the fastest to issue citizenship. It has an E2 treaty with the US, and although you are required to live there for 3 years, which no one usually does, it at least offers that minimal protection from a possible sanction or travel ban from the US, something already discussed a few weeks ago. Currently, this passport, as you can see, allows you access to practically all Latin America except Paraguay and Mexico, but those don't concern me because we can apply for temporary or permanent residency there without needing to live or invest. So we already gain access to those, and it also grants entry to the Schengen area and the UK. That's why many people consider renouncing US citizenship, because aside from a few countries and the US itself, you retain similar freedom of movement. However, rumors are circulating that this access could be lost, both to Schengen and the ability to apply for B1, B2 visas to the US. For many people, this would remove the appeal, especially considering that the minimum donation required in Dominica is $200,000. Adding dependents, legal fees and government charges, the total could easily reach $250,000. Many people aren't willing to pay that much for a Caribbean passport by donation, and even less, or nearly $300,000 for a real estate option that doesn't even give you a full property. At that point, if access is indeed removed, the ideal move would be to buy a Turkish passport through real estate or bank deposit between $400,000 and $500,000, refundable after 3 years. Plus, you can earn returns through Airbnb or the country's interest rate. Of course, the Turkish lira is in free fall, and maybe you won't recover 100% of your investment, or maybe you will, since many prices are fixed in dollars. It doesn't provide Schengen access, but from an economic and reputational standpoint, buying a Turkish passport for the same level of movement as a Caribbean one seems like a safer move to me. Now the Schengen area needs to be covered. That's why we would acquire a golden visa to cover the entire Schengen zone. Even if our original passport does or doesn't allow us to enter Europe, thanks to this golden residence, we can travel freely without being questioned. Because many times, even Latin Americans who technically have access for 90 days out of 180 are bombarded with questions upon entry. The most attractive golden visas in Europe right now are those from Portugal, Hungary, Latvia, Italy and Greece. Until April, Spain also offered one, and many people would buy a property worth €500,000 in Marbella, Valencia, Madrid or Barcelona to secure their stay in Spain for up to 6 months a year without becoming tax residents. But the Spanish government has now shut it down, and I believe this will eventually happen to the others still available today. We already know that in Portugal, the golden visa is no longer available through real estate, but it is through government-approved investment funds with returns. However, Portugal is taking a long time to process these residency permits, in some cases 3 to 4 years, and now they want to change the citizenship law. Before, the 5-year count began from the application date, and you could naturalize after just 7 days per year in the country. Now they want to extend that to 10 years, starting only from the date the permit is granted. So if it takes 2 or 3 years to get the permit and then 10 years to get citizenship, we are talking about 12 to 13 years to obtain it. For me, it's not an option, but for some, they don't need to live 6 months or 9 months per year in the country, so it's still a viable option to access the Schengen area in the long term at zero cost and eventually even get a EU citizenship again at zero cost and without living there. Hungary also offers an option through government-approved funds with returns, where you must invest 250,000 euros. Greece offers real estate options ranging from 250,000 to 400,000 euros or even up to 1 million euros depending on the region and structure. The cheapest one would be Latvia, under 100,000 euros via investment in startups or real estate 250,000, and you would also secure this Schengen visa at zero cost. If we combine the Turkish passport with a golden visa in Schengen, we will match the freedom of movement offered by a Latin America or Caribbean passport, but with the advantage that it's not a donation. Instead of spending 200,000 on a donation, we might spend only 100 or 150,000 split between two variants, one securing Schengen, the other granting access to key regions. Meanwhile, the Caribbean route depends on whether European authorities remove Schengen access or not. Now, if we combine the Turkish passport through real estate, a Schengen golden visa via real estate or funds, and a passport through real estate in Grenada, we would have a very solid portfolio without donating large sums. It would be under 1 million euros and we would have access to only 85 or 86% of the country in the world. We would only be missing key destinations like the US, Canada and Australia. Maybe your primary passport already covered this, or we might obtain a specific visa like an E2 for the US. I wouldn't go for anything temporary or permanent in Canada. I don't like the direction the country is taking. As for Australia, that would need to be evaluated. If you want to take this to next level and go beyond real estate based options and you don't mind donating, we could include Serbian citizenship through a donation of €500,000 and eliminate the Turkish and Schengen golden visas options. That way you would have a passport that isn't categorized as an investment based. Even applying for B1, B2 visas to the US would be easier than it is with Turkish or Grenadian passports. You could still combine this with a Schengen golden visa to guarantee European access. We are not looking to improve mobility because we have a good passport. We are looking for security. You could also combine this with temporary or permanent residencies in countries where you might want to live, open bank accounts, or establish future paths to citizenship. This might be the UAE with a golden visa by real estate investment for $100,000 or a donation of around $50,000, or Malaysia's My Second Home, which is popular for that region, or Vietnam's new visa, or Indonesia's permanent residency by bank deposit, or temporary residencies in Mexico, Panama, and Paraguay, where you can eventually obtain permanent residency or even citizenship without living there. These are paper residencies. You don't need to be present and you can gradually upgrade them. Also, you could consider Mauritius through investment, which also doesn't require physical presence to obtain permanent residency. This way, for 1 million euros or with a few million, you can build a very solid banking reputation in the places you like, benefit from being resident, travel the world without anyone questioning you or saying you can't even if your passport technically allows it. And the best part is that except for Serbia, all the options I have mentioned are based on investment, not donation. So after the holding period, you can recover your money and still keep the document or access and apply for new permits to eventually have the most passport possible or at least the greatest possible access to countries as a resident. If you like this approach, I invite you to fill out the form in the description because this is not the only path we can take, and depending on your case, we might find an even better international solution.